Oh, it's not going to be recorded.
Not on
Maybe it
streaming.
will. Okay.
On YouTube.
Okay.
Live. Hey y'all.
What's going on, everybody?
What's up? What's up? What's up, y'all? This is our first ever. No, this is actually the second time we went live because remember at LDI we went live for New Year's.
Oh yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
It was interesting. But what's
this
up?
is our first live where we're running the show. So
I know, gosh. We need listen. Too Black, if you're listening. We have to call you back up, put you back on the team. So hey y'all. So basically, as we explained in the first episode, basically once the season actually launches, every other week we'll do a live. That's basically like a reflection on the recorded show, and then just chopping it up, kicking it with y'all. So hey.
What's up?
So who here? We got Emma, aka Vol. We got David. What up, David? What you talk about? Dr. CBS, the session with Onye, Claudia, Dr. Prosper, and whoever that other person was great. Thank you. We'll definitely talk about the Black Radical Organizing Conference. We got Eric, we got T. Brown, Marley Gordon. Hey y'all. So thanks so much for tapping in on your day off. We know that none of us care about the 4th of July, but it is a day off to be with family, kick it, barbecue, chill. So we're glad you all are here.
Oh yeah, David said he got to tell me about some decent places to eat in Boston. Is your palate good? Because when you tell me what's gonna be good, is it actually gonna be good? That's what I want to know.
Listen, we need a good Ethiopian restaurant. Like that is our shiz, and that is what we thrive off of. So
yes.
All right, so we could just hop right in. So we'll just start off doing a little bit of, reflection on the last show and then go from there. Hey, Ricky, thank you. Y'all, you know what? Since you guys are like our core crew, I'm going to let you in on something. This is a skirt that I have pulled up to make a dress for this live, and I feel great about that. So
it looks cute.
All right, so Layla, what did you think about the first show?
I mean, we had a lot going on with the first show. So we were in the midst of traveling around Europe to do these 2 conferences and then a little bit of fun in between. But it seemed like we had a good showing. Like I'm just surprised that after I guess a year and a half, people were actually still waiting for us to be able to come back and do something. So I'm happy to know that people found what we were doing useful enough to continue to hang on to it and to come back with us. You got a lot of love for your new edition coming very soon in the comments. So I'm feeling pretty good about where things are going. We're still kind of solidifying what's going to happen as we start, as we settle in, but I'm feeling good so far.
Yeah, figuring out the technology, so even going live, we try to go live, or we try to figure out going live through YouTube, and we're like, let's just do StreamYard. We know the platform somewhat, but it's definitely a learning curve, y'all. We analog, and we'll get better over time. But we definitely wanted. We're definitely figuring it all out, man. Too Black did a lot for us, and we're so grateful. I think, and we had a lot of people tap in for us, just kind of coming back a little bit out of the blue. Let me tell you something though. Okay, so we're approving the comments that go underneath each of the shows just for reasons, and we did have this one comment. So here's what I want to say. So somebody's speculating, number one, on who my partner is, and then proceeding to give whatever perspective they have on that. Don't do that shit. And what I mean by that is, if you are actually concerned, if you actually have some, first of all, the assumption is wild, but if you have some concern, don't do that shit publicly in terms of trying to put a comment on our page, and don't do it anonymously. Like, have some actual, see, here's the thing. People do a lot of dirtbag shit and try to couch it in comradeship or allyship. Mm-hmm. But if you actually are trying to look out, I am widely available on social media. I have a website, all sorts of things. And so Did not appreciate that. So if you tapped in, you know who you are. Don't do that shit again. That was not cool. And just in general, like if we're opening up about our lives on here, and if you all have some type of comment or some input that you want to have, contact us directly. Like, don't we really love our LSR family already. We loved our LDI family, but don't do dirtbag shit, okay?
Yeah. Really, like you said, there are ways to reach us directly if that's something that you actually really feel like, oh, this is something that I want to share with you, that I think you need to know. There are ways to do that with more care than, like you said, leaving anonymous comments under videos. So yeah, glad that is addressed. And
but one other thing, just in general, with people's relationship, you have no idea what people's relationships are. You don't know what the terms of their relationship are. You don't know how they interact with one another. You don't know any of these things. And also to make, crazy comments. This is, I'm talking about having a baby. I said I found my life partner. And to make these types of comments, like, these are people's lives that you're just dropping in and meddling with. Like, don't do that for anybody's relationship. Like, mind your own business, just as praxis, mind your fucking business. So
there's a recurring theme here from LDI. I remember us having that conversation then. But yeah, so
thanks, Deborah.
All right. So part of what we said we wanted to do with the lives is give a little bit of a recap of whatever episode we would have covered before. Maybe introduce a little bit of new information, but we really do want this as an opportunity to interact with you all because that's not something that we did under the LDI format. And so we really did want to have this as an opportunity for us to talk about the subject matter that comes up, or even sort of what's happening in the world at this particular moment. And so I think it's important, I think that the way we're using StreamYard, there's a slight delay in the comments that we see here. Mm-hmm. So just, bear with us as we try to follow the comments and respond to them. But we just want to let you all know, how we're trying to fill these things out, and we are welcome to constructive feedback about this process at any point in time.
And then also drop in the chat, if there's anything you all want us to discuss. So, we have our broad sections, life, study, revolution. If there's anything you want to talk about, okay, let's talk France. Yeah. All right, listen, let's talk France. And Ricky is in the chat. So I know Ricky has many thoughts. Fuck France being the most visceral and the top of mind, but we can definitely talk France. But if there's anything you all want us to chat about, definitely drop it in the chat. Yeah. So we mentioned we were kind of toward the tail end of our trip, but still had like about a week left when we recorded, I believe. So we definitely had. First, do you want to address the Kwame Ture?
Oh yeah. So last episode, I mentioned that we have a Kwame Ture, the AAPRPGC has a Kwame Ture seminar coming up. Initially, we were trying to do it in July, but I believe that we are going to be pushing it back until August at the moment. And so just stay tuned. We, under all of the show notes, as things are actually available, the links will be there. And so you can always check back for more information about that. And you can also go to the AAPRPGC's website at any point in time. And I would, in fact, encourage you to do that. So yeah, I just wanted to offer that as a follow-up from last show.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then, so we had talked about, we were going to Nice, which, by the way, turned out to be
not so nice.
Not so nice. And we're going to a Marxism, Marxist and race seminar, which we did, and it turned out to be cool. It was cool for what it was. I think we got a lot of positive feedback, like on our papers. We are primarily talked about Black people, although there was one paper about Harry Haywood and the Black Belt thesis, although I had some questions on that. But anyway, we only ended up going to one of the 2 days. The second day I wasn't feeling well, and we were tired. We were ready to go.
And the universe saw fit to make us more tired.
Yes.
We had our flight got canceled, which then had a whole domino effect because we were trying to fly back from Nice to get to Lisbon to get back to the US, and just it was a mess. Like it was
Hot mess. But there was a dude there that I was glad that I listened to his paper. His name was Andy Higginbotham, I think. I think he was a white, either British or South African cat. And he presented on, I think he actually was the one that was talking about Harry Haywood. I think he was the one that was actually talking about Harry Haywood and the Black Belt thesis. And then I started to Google his work. His work is pretty good, and he does stuff on like racial capitalism in South Africa, but and black communists in South Africa, etc. So I was really interested to find his work, and I kind of wish I had discovered it before, while I was writing my book. But so that was cool. Yeah. So there was some good, some good moments. It was hot in there though, you guys.
Like, oh my God. But not only, it wasn't just that it was hot, it was that there was no air circulation. Like it was just like maybe we had a little taste of what it felt like to be in that submarine.
Oh my God. Oh geez. And then the other thing too is like, see, the intellectual engagement at these things is fine, but like the forced socializing is terrible. And because we were literally the two only Black people there, if I'm not mistaken.
There was one other Black man, but I think he was a student because he did not present, and I didn't really hear him engaging a lot. So he might have been one of the students up there.
So like they literally kind of like, I don't want to say held hostage just in case somebody watched. It was a lot of, they were very adamant about us like socializing there. Like we were trying to like dip off early. And the lady literally one of the women like literally chased us down and was like, please don't go. Like,
but to be fair, you said early. We weren't trying to dip off early. The program had ended. We were trying to go and have dinner elsewhere. Mm-hmm. And they decided that they wanted to have a little drink session or whatever. And she definitely sprinted after us to stay and chit chat. So, which we did, but yeah.
And I'm not gonna lie, like it's excruciating. Like if anybody knows anything about me, I hate small talk. I cannot stand it. We're both like introverted, and people assume that because we're gregarious with each other. By the way, people mistook that gregariousness for us being lovers.
We're in a relationship, and Sharice's baby is mine. So whoever has something to say about that. No.
Layla's my baby daddy. Surprise. But anyway, people think that because we're like gregarious with each other that we want to talk to everybody else. So that was a little bit difficult. But so it was clown shoes from top to bottom in terms of the travel. Yeah. And when we were flying back, we already had to wait in the airport for like 7 hours or something crazy. But then our flight got canceled. And the next day we were supposed to be flying back to the US. And interestingly, so we're flying EasyJet, which is basically like the Spirit of Europe. Yeah. They only had a flight back to Lisbon on Saturday. So we ended up like having to do this whole maneuvering to get back on Friday. We had to try to extend our Airbnb. Initially, they were not trying to let us extend the Airbnb, y'all. They were like, no. And we're like, okay, that's great. But our stuff is literally there. And Layla was packed. I was not packed. My stuff was strewn about, of course.
And I want to just say, I said to Sharice before, I was like, don't you think you might want to pack up a little bit? She's like, no. I was like, okay.
We had a whole day. Listen, I was completely in the right. We had a whole day if things had gone according to plan.
It's true.
So anyway, by the way, we still need to do our reimbursement. So we ended up having to stay an extra night, pushing our flights back. And actually our flight to the US ended up being cheaper. So we ended up getting flight credits, but it was a mess. It was a hot mess. And the room that they got for us, you guys, was so raggedy. And like I had never heard of a 1-star hotel. Like I thought that was a mistake, but I went and looked on hotels.com and no, it was a 1-star hotel. And whatever, like fine. But then it smelled crazy. And I have if you know anything about me, I have something about smells, and especially when it smells like mildewy or moldy, and I'm pregnant, so it's heightened. And I was like, oh no. So we ended up having to get our own Airbnb. So first of all, when we saw we were flying on EasyJet, we're like, maybe we just shouldn't go. Then we went, and it was not too bad. Then when we got to the hotel, we're like, yeah, this is crazy. And then our flight got, so just the whole trip, it really wasn't worth it. And it was kind of like, you know, we had already been gone, what, 2.5 weeks?
I mean, I think at that point we had already been on 3 weeks because
3 weeks.
it was like
Yeah.
3 weeks total. So yeah.
So in
I was
retrospect,
tired. It was time for it to end.
yeah. So that it was a little, that mission was a little bit of a fail, but
what I will say about that, which is something we both reflected on, like it's I think it's always stressful to be kind of stranded and not have the most ideal housing situations, but it's even more stressful when you don't have resources to actually figure out what to do. And fortunately, because this was a work trip for both of us, we both had the benefits of our being able, our procurement cards from our respective jobs. And so it is just something like to think about. I think about, when we invite people to places and we offer to pay, what we, and I say we in a sort of broad sense, and we offer to pay, and we are trying to make sure people get places and are accommodated. I do think that it's interesting. I think it's important to kind of follow up, right? Like when you invite people to somewhere, and this is not a what we call an admonition on the part of anyone, but I think just as a general practice, like when we invite people to speak, especially when we're offering to cover some of their travel expenses or housing expenses or whatever, just to make sure they're like, hey, did you make it out okay, right?
yeah,
because we didn't make it out okay.
we did not make it out okay.
Yes.
But I will say, it did not even cross my mind to hit the people up because I couldn't do it. Like I just couldn't imagine more conversation, y'all. And listen, it was perfect. They were perfectly nice and perfectly smart and all those things, but it was just a lot. It was a lot. And so and when we're inviting people out to things, like also thinking about like accommodations, like nothing's too good for the working class. We don't have to be extravagant. We don't have to put people in the Waldorf Astoria, but it's like, we need to be mindful of these things in terms of like, we want people to be relatively okay, even like our comrades, we want people to be relatively like, not necessarily like comfortable, when coming to these types of things. And so these are just things to consider, man.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So
all of us, like, that as we plan events and things and we have speakers, I think it's just always something to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
But I will say overall, I do think like the conversations were useful. It's nice to make connections or whatever. I just think that it just kind of it hurt things for us because it was on the tail end of a long trip, and so we were over it at that point. But yeah.
The other thing I will say though, what I noticed both at the critical theory circle, but more so at this last conference, like people expect, if you do Black stuff or African stuff that white folks are not familiar with, people expect you to bring them along much more. But when they're talking about Foucault and Derrida and the random white man that they're talking about, that they just assume we all know because the West, they don't have that same expectation. But like if they're completely confused and befuddled, they kind of feel like, oh yeah, we need to make sure we're bringing people along. Fuck that, because no, them old ass white men wasn't doing that shit. And so like that's also kind of interesting. Like just because you don't know doesn't mean that it's our responsibility. Write down the names that we're talking about because we mentioned plenty, and like you do the work. It's so interesting. Like there's something about like intellectualism where it's like if somebody else doesn't know things, it's you've demonstrated mastery. But it seems like when white folks don't know shit, then you did it wrong, or you're not pulling from the right genealogy, or like you have to take more care to bring people along. I just found that interesting. It's like, well, if you just say you don't know, it's okay.
Yeah. But to admit that they don't know certain things is to be able, it's for them to have to admit some kind of fault, and yet we get treated as if it's some sort of deficit when we are not as conversant, and that we must be conversant in what they do and our own shit, but they only have to be conversant in their own. And so that, I mean, and I encounter that at every stage, right? Like both as a as a Pan-Africanist, as a person when I was in my graduate program, and doing as a Latin Americanist, as people who do work on the left, like all these, there are all these ways that we are a part of sort of within the U.S. Academy intellectually marginalized communities. And so like there are certain bodies of literature that certain people don't engage with, or even just kind of like, when I talk about race in Latin America, I always wonder about how much kind of 101 stuff I need to do about the just the fact that there are black people in Latin America, and I feel like that's something that's very basic that enough people have done that I don't need to rehearse. But then inevitably you get questions about those kinds of things, right?
Mhm.
And so it is always something to something to constantly navigate, and it is a different kind of stressor when you have to go into those rooms and know that like you're not always even going to get questions that really engage you on a higher level, that you have to sort of, like you said, bring people along.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not doing that. So it's like I'll do it for my students, of course, but it's
Yeah.
like if it's a mutual exchange, then sure. If that's kind of like the basis that we set. But if it's because, you don't know, and so you think that it's my job to bring you up to speed and then also do like my paper, also like extend the discourse, like sorry about that. So, but anyway, you know, it just reinforces my love for my homogenous black African radical spaces, because it's like there's just a baseline and then we can get to like the nitty gritty. We can like push back, critique, build, as opposed to like people being like so asking very like perfunctory questions. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just being a dickhead. I don't care. I'm pregnant.
So should we go to any of the comments, or should we kind of keep rolling?
Let's see. So somebody asked about the PAI, if there's any updates on the PAIGC. I don't know what exactly that was referring to. And then
And probably Ricky might know that better than either of us.
any updates on the PAIGC in Guinea-Bissau.
Yeah.
And then Ricky said AAPRPGC.
I think that was in response to something else.
Oh, I see.
I was making a
The
comment.
AAPRP. I see. Okay. So Ricky, drop it in the chat. We can put it on the screen.
But then Eric had this question in terms of France. What are our thoughts on how they're putting a lot of blame on African and immigrant populations? It's
right. Of course.
But even I think, what was it today? I was just watching a little CNN interview about it, and there was a black woman. I don't know where she was from. Her name kind of made me think maybe she was from somewhere in sort of Muslim West Africa, whatever. And she was, I think in the beginning, it's very much how we see kind of mainstream politics here, right? In the beginning, like she's like, this is very much a part of an ongoing situation. Like this is a response to, ongoing issues with the state. But then in the end, the last thing she ended by saying was a comment about that I don't think they should be destroying their communities, their neighborhoods. And I don't understand why this is something that we feel like we need to engage every single time. This conversation about the destruction of property and things in our neighborhoods being destroyed, as if that shit is really ours, one, to begin with. But also that we always have to do this kind of like we can acknowledge all of the sort of structural, systemic, historical problems and say that the sort of rage is justifiable, but then we always have to add these caveats in the end. But I don't think they should be doing this, right? And I feel like we need to be able to be a little bit more unapologetic about those kinds of things, right? If the rage is justified, allow the rage to be justified, right? Mm-hmm. And this is just yet another, all of France's policies, which attempt to create this sort of French nationhood, regardless of sort of race or religion. I mean, this is all these kind of things coming back to bite them, right? Like it is very much the case that while they have tried to create a country where people are supposedly not tied to their sort of other national, religious, ethnic identities, it is clear that people are living these contradictions in a very real way in their everyday life, right?
Right. And I mean, I think, just a very basic point is like, Africans are in France because France was in Africa. So you reap what you sow. You go and you fuck everybody's shit up on the continent, from Mali to Burkina Faso to Senegal, etc. And then people are it's not as if people see France as some crown jewel. People are forced to migrate for better life chances, and then they get brutalized, marginalized, banished to these banlieues, right? Which is the so-called ghettos that are on the suburbs that are on the outskirts, where most Algerian racialized Black people are living. And then when enough is enough, we're going to burn shit down. So, I think that part of this commentary is like the ongoing anxiety that Europe as a whole is having about this influx of immigration, not from the Ukrainians, from the colors, of course.
Yeah.
And it's like you reap what you sow. So did you not were you not colonizers for much of the 20th century? You would not have to worry about these populations coming and trying to make a better life in France. And it's racism. People would rather blame it on immigrants and racialized populations than to really look at what their internal policy is and look at the ways that structurally they're creating conditions that are untenable and that are dehumanizing for a large majority of the population, not just the Africans, not just the Arab population. And so but we know that Euro Americans very seldom want to take responsibility for anything, and so it's easier. And then as we saw the nationalist groups coming out, the fascist groups, the right-wing groups talking about France for the French, Europe for the Europeans. Well, that ship has already sailed when you go and you colonize everybody else's shit. Like what was once yours isn't yours anymore, and you're just gonna have to deal with it.
And I mean, I don't think that this is anything that will be a shock or a surprise to our particular audience, but I think in terms of general conversation, this conversation about North Africans and sort of collapsing the African category and even this kind of category of Blackness, right? I think it's interesting because otherwise people are always trying to make this false distinction between North Africa and this sort of Arabized populations of North Africa. But it is very clear that under the French regime and the rest of the world, like that distinction is only being made when it is convenient to divide and conquer populations, right? And so even in our own kinds of rhetorics, like not continuing to sort of play into this kind of sub-Saharan African divide, and even because like what was it, a month ago or so, when Kevin Hart got in some kind of trouble for making a comment about Egyptians being Black, and then there's all this outrage coming from many mainstream Egyptians contesting that, right? But again, recognizing like how you are seen and or treated in the rest of the world, and trying to sort of disassociate with Blackness does not create this escape hatch whereby you get treated much better, right? And so that it serves us really to think about our struggles in more linked ways.
And I think that's something that's really important too, is that like, we're seeing all this news and discourse about like, we all need to look at France, like why, America, Americans, USians need to take note. The French are generally always turning up. That doesn't necessarily, number one, it doesn't necessarily mean they're progressive for the rest of the world. And number two, I think we need to be asked, like, this is, I always say populism is not objectively good, right? Just like unions in their essence are good, but the content of the unions is not objectively good, right? The police ostensibly have a union. And so I think that we need to ask the question, like, what does this actually mean for Black people, for Africans, for colonized people, as opposed to thinking that we can adopt some look to the French for some model. Last I checked, the French put an indemnity on Haiti for earning their liberation. So I will never look to the French for anything. I don't give a fuck how rowdy they're getting. They can burn down the whole country, and I think that will probably be an objective good for the world. But like for people to be calling on France to be some type of model for us, we do need to get active. But I refuse to look to the West for any type of model for anything.
But also, when they say that, they're talking about mainstream white French folks because in the rest of the world, people are like if we look around the world, there are always examples of popular uprisings across Africa, across Latin America. But a part of the issue is the sort of nature of the state, right? And what it can be sort of facilitated after the fact. But the French people are not the only people doing that shit.
Not at all. But it's the only thing, it's all that people know about because France, and they're like, oh no, they're burning down the Eiffel Tower.
It's the Francophiles out there.
And I think that the other thing that we have to understand is that the US by far is the most repressive country in the world. And what I mean by, or in the so-called West, probably in the world. And what I mean by that is that France, England, Germany, all of these countries have communist parties that have some type of, that are in power in some way. The United States has the Democrats and the Republicans, and the anti-communism is endemic in the United States, right? It presents as anti-Bolshevism after 1917, but it's anti-anarchism before that, anti-industrial workers of the world, anti-socialism in the 1800s, anti-workers movements in general prior to that. And so the U.S. is such a anti-radical country that it is a much more uphill battle in the United States to get active in the ways that there's much more, history is much more on the side of radicals or progressives in other parts of the world than in the United States. And that's just historically true.
Yeah. So Ricky asked the question. She said, "What would you say the difference in experience was for you with the conference in Europe and the one in Atlanta, being a speaker at both?" So you can speak to that because I didn't go to Atlanta.
More Black people in Atlanta, of course. It was a similar experience in that it was an ecumenical left. There was all sorts of representations of what that means, right? There was like New Africans, there were anarchists, there were communists, there were Black Lives Matter folks of the different varieties. So in that regard, it was similar, right? Because people are coming from different perspectives. It was said that our panel, the panel with myself, Onye, Claudia, and Mamira, etc., that panel was the most internationalist, right? That panel actually spoke beyond just the United States and Africa, brought in the Caribbean and brought in a more robust analysis of like the Black world, right? And so in that regard, I think that there's a sort of, there's in both spaces there were similar oversights, right? But of course in Atlanta, because there is a baseline of like race matters, settler colonialism matters, neocolonialism matters, the starting point of the conversation, I think, was much was different, right? And it was much more productive. And also this was all organizers basically, and so the what is to be done question was centered much more.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was interesting to see, like, there's just a lot of contradictions within the Black shit. This is why it's really important for Africans to focus on Africa and the Black world, because there's so many contradictions and so much diversity within like our own community and so much confusion that we have to work out, right? And doing that, I think, is a service to proletarian struggle and to worker struggle and to like liberatory struggle writ large. And I think those contradictions or those differences in perspective and approach were very apparent. And granted, I was only there for one day, so I missed some of the other conversations, but it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it. That's what I think is interesting for me, or like what I'm looking forward to. Like, what are the coalitions? What are the projects? What is the next conference that comes out of it? That's sort of what I'm interested to see. And if organizers take heed to the real criticism of including people who have been known to not have our interests in mind. For whatever solidarity, whatever the reasons are, a lot of people weren't with that shit. And I think that needs to be heeded.
Yeah. So obviously I didn't go to Atlanta, but I think with these meetings in general, because I've been to a lot of them in the Latin American context. But it's also interesting to kind of, to me, the meetings are obviously like a place where people get to come together, and this is something that I kind of write about even in my own work. Like the conferences or the meetings, right, are places where you are able to realize the kind of sort of intellectual and political community that you're in a global sense, in sort of the flesh, right, in the real kind of moment. But for the most part, like, the work is not those conferences, right? The work is a lot of what organizing takes to get to that conference, what comes after that conference. So like I think about, the first time I went to Venezuela in 2011, it was this big regional hemispheric meeting for Afro descendants, right? And that was, like I said, that was in 2011. And then it wasn't until 2019 that they had actually formed this anti-imperialist, like Pan-Africanist Kumbe, this organization to think about Black people on the left, right? But that's definitely something that they were building towards from that moment, right? And so I think it's a lot of times like it's difficult to see sometimes the kind of scale of things, but what I do really appreciate about those conferences a lot of times, particularly like more like the one in Atlanta, more like the ones I've been to in the Latin American context. It's just really getting to see that like other people are doing this work and you get to actually be physically connected. Because I do think that's something that we need in our daily lives. We are not moving around our spaces with people who think and feel like us for the most part, right? Like we might have a handful, but it's nice to be in a space where for the most part, not 100%, but for the most part, we're kind of on the same page about certain sort of political goals. And I think that is important for like maintaining a kind of fighting spirit, right?
Yeah, and I will say I think it would have been also a different conversation if there were more organizations from that were not US based.
Yeah.
But to Ricky's point, having this big tent thing, right? You can kind of see the different conclusions or the different modes of analysis of people. I get that, but also persons who are in attendance are at different levels of ideological development. And so often they latch on to what is most accessible. And so when people are talking that bullshit, like, we got to ask our grandmas, what do they think about their class position or whatever the fuck people are talking about. That is more immediately legible. And so I think that we have to, and of course our job as sort of dialecticians, as rigorous sort of people engaged in political education is to make our position that more palatable, more legible, and show that it's the correct position. But I also think that people are easily distracted. And so I will just always be more draconian, I guess, in terms of I don't think we ever need to platform or give voice to people who have no reason to who have proven themselves to be enemies, because there's people with whom we deeply disagree that there's also space, but people who are in it who are class enemies and who have stepped in front of the people and who have used movement for self-aggrandizement, I just don't see any I don't have any sympathy for that. Especially with no atonement. Now if there would have been some type of like, listen, I know what was said about me, if there would have been any type of contrition, any type of acknowledgement of being like a charlatan, but I'm trying to do better. Okay. But there was none of that. It was just kind of like, and then you bring your own crew of it. Listen, anyway, I think that we need to be mindful is all I'm saying. I think we need to be mindful. And it's our responsibility to hold the line, because if we're giving legitimacy, if there are certain people giving legitimacy to unsavory characters, then other people might be like, oh, okay. Like if they see these people presented at this Black Radical conference, they might be like, oh, okay, cool. Like, no, not cool, not fucking cool at all. Right? So I don't know, man.
All the comments are funny. Okay.
Yeah. What else? So listen, Salifa, what you need help with? Okay, we all need help. It was just the freezer in the basement. Oh, listen, it was all of the panels were recorded, y'all. All of the panels are recorded, so you can go back and see for yourself. But it was it was a lot. It was a lot. And by the way, we're referring to the National Black Radical Organizing Conference that was organized by Community Movement Builders, which shout out to Coco and Tunde, because they really did the damn thing. Like, it actually was well organized, and it actually was really, I think, really informative, and they did a good job. So not taking anything away from that at all. Let's see. What else? What else? Is there anything else?
This is kind of going back, but I don't know if you put this up there already, but Ricky's comment about seeing what's happening in France and asking really what does it mean for Africa, as
Right.
opposed to what does it mean for, I think that's really important just to for us to always think, like, that's the question that should always be me. What does that mean for Africa? What does that mean for us as African
Mhm.
people, whether we be on the continent or in the diaspora? And that's yet to be seen.
Yeah, and I think to Ricky's point, like the interesting thing, why why eyes ought to be on France because they're getting their ass whooped internally and externally, right? So like they got whooped up on by the Mali and what was it, Mali, Burkina Faso, and the federation that's happening there, and then now internally they're getting whooped up on, and it's so I mean I think that's great, and I think that we need to continue to this sort of teaming up needs to continue to happen. Honestly, so but it will. I think that I the brutalization will come, right?
Mm.
The repression will come. Like we know that imperialists do not just take uprisings lightly. We see the massive backlash that happened in the US from the 2020 uprising, and that had its radical moments but was largely just like, hey, anyway, whatever. So I think we need to be thinking about what support and solidarity we have for Africans who are gonna be brutalized in the aftermath of all of this, and the legislation and policy that's going to be enacted to try to prevent this from happening again. So that's something that we need to consider.
Yes, David, you're right. The stronger the movement gets, the more repressive the state will get, and that's something that we gotta always remember and stay prepared for.
Will we continue? That was a question about Brother Westa. So Layla, you registering green and voting for Brother Westa. Where was it?
What? I didn't see that question.
Right here. Show. Okay. This is from Eric. What are your thoughts in terms of efficacy of Brother West? Kanye?
You don't have no sense, yo.
Well, okay. So I saw that potentially. Now I didn't watch this. I didn't watch the episode, but he's potentially having Mumia Abu Jamal as a running mate, which I think is excellent. Number one, because it will expose Mumia and political prisoners writ large to a new generation who might not have ever even heard of Mumia. Number two, I think Mumia is a voice of our times. I think that thinking back to the conference we were just talking about, one of the good things about it, I feel like political prisoners really had a voice and really were lifted up. Mm-hmm. And I think that likewise with Mumia Abu, I'm more excited about Mumia if Mumia is the running mate. Now, I don't know if that was cap. I don't know if that was a publicity stunt, but that would be more exciting. In terms of Cornel West, now, I think the potential, like if there's a potential for a West run to really make third parties viable, which I don't know, right? If it's something that can sort of make a third party option, I guess, which would be the Green Party, like a viable in future elections in terms of in sort of not just the 4-year presidential cycle, but just in general, then that's something. But I'm against celebrity, y'all. I'm against celebrity. Like I think that we need to follow movements, not individuals. And I think that Cornel West is he's often tapped to speak on behalf of many things. I don't know. And he's good on Palestine.
My part of my issue though is and this comes from my sort of oppositional stance to the whole presidential electoral machine in general, is the decision to run and then to like facilitate, like to raise whatever resources are necessary to run. Like, is that a is that a good use of time and resources in a real sense? Like, if there's something that can actually be generated from that, why all of that going into running a presidential campaign? I don't know. Like, I feel like we have seen over the course of the last 50 plus years, people make these attempts to run as a third party for president. And maybe some people get some little individual clout on it, but I just feel like that is an experiment that has run its course, and we have proven what we need to prove about what the nature of at least presidential electoral politics are in this country. And I just don't really, I don't see the point in general. I really don't. So that for me, and again, I think to Ricky's point, I don't know that Cornel West really has an agenda in terms of a mass base, right? And so that's something else to sort of think about, or sorry, a political project for a mass base. So I don't know. Like, my response to that is generally clown shoes. Like, I just don't understand why. I understand why, but
I mean, what I will say, so like I will never be one to reduce politics to electoralism, but I do think that this is an opportunity for voter registration, which I think that local, like if we the judge shit has really like made an impact. The way that the conservatives have been able to put massive amounts of judges at the sort of state and federal level. So I think that if Cornel West can sort of galvanize people to get interested in different types of elections, not just the 4-year race, but different types of elections, because I do think that the voter registration campaigns are opportunities for political education. And I don't know that the left can concede that to like the liberals and doing their slide and they raggedy ass fucking Uggs and whatever the hell they doing, right? I think that there are different types of opportunities for organizing and mobilizing a mass base, but I think that needs to be direct, or like something that it needs to be sort of kept clearly separate from just voting for Cornel West.
Yeah, I agree with
that. Yeah, so Ujima is a third party, but also is building a political project as it builds its base. Sure, but I mean, I think it's interesting, right? Like, I think the Crocs. Listen, I got like a lot of Crocs. I really like them. Anyway, I think that probably, I'd be interested to hear more about like what Ajamu thinks, because Ajamu was on the vice presidential ticket for the Green Party, right? And I wonder what that meant for like building out Black Alliance for Peace and for the different type of work that he's doing. So, but again, Ajamu has political projects. BAP has political projects. So I'm really just most concerned about the celebrity aspect, right? Like it's just very hard to get, it's very easy, to get caught up in like the cult of personality. And I don't know that people who are put in those positions have enough self-awareness, because it's not just Cornel West, it's others. I'm trying to not to talk so much shit, but it's others as well, right? So I think we just need to be mindful of that.
I don't have anything else to say about that.
Right. So Ricky says it's not electoral politics that is made right, but how it's being utilized, understanding mission, strategy, and tactics. Correct. So that's our position on Cornel West. So, but are you voting for Cornel West is the question. Layla.
I don't vote in presidential elections.
Sorry, Dr. West, you're not getting Dr. Brown's vote. All right. So something else that we wanted to talk about, though. So, like, as you all know, today is the 4th of July. And we know, of course, Frederick Douglass' famous speech of what is the 4th of July to a slave. But we also wanted to note that, like, there's other so one of the other significances of today, other than the settler colonial bullshit, is that today is the birthday of a woman called Ana Livia Cordero, who our good friend Dr. Sandy Placido has done a lot of research on. And in fact, she was responsible for getting her archive deposited at at the Radcliffe at Harvard. And Ana Olivia is like a badass, y'all. She was married to Julian Mayfield. She was a Puerto Rican revolutionary. She was a physician. She actually was W.E.B. Du Bois's physician in Ghana. Um, she
And
started.
she was like running some health mission in Ghana under at Nkrumah's invitation too.
She started an organization called El Proyecto, which was basically like the corollary of the Young Lords, but in Puerto Rico, that was like a socialist, anti-imperialist, internationalist organization. So I'm just going to read from this little piece. I'll drop the link in the chat about a little bit more about Ana Livia. But so anyway, so next time we're going to celebrate the 4th of July, we can be celebrating Ana Livia. So this little part says that this is a piece by Sandy called A Global Vision, Ana Livia Cordero and the Puerto Rican Liberation Struggle. So she said, Cordero, a Puerto Rican female physician and anti-imperialist activist, dedicated her life to Puerto Rican liberation, and she forged ties with activists throughout Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the United States. She was clear about situating the Black struggle in the United States within an anti-imperialist framework. She insisted that Puerto Ricans embrace their Black, mulatto, and Caribbean identity and their link to other Blacks in the diaspora. And she highlighted the role of Asia, Africa, and Latin America in the development of global capitalism. Thus, Cordero's anti-colonial, anti-racist, and anti-capitalist perspective expanded the geographic and demographic boundaries of each of the movements in which she participated during her lifetime. So there's way more about Ana Livia. Sandy is writing a book about her as we speak that should be dropping hopefully sometime in 2024 with University of Pennsylvania Press. But yes, but then there's also other birthdays that are around this time, right?
Yep. So I think I mentioned it last time, but George Padmore's birthday is the 28th of June, but Kwame Ture's was then the following day, the 29th. Patrice Lumumba was actually born on I should say, I don't know. I can't think of who was born first, but my grandmother, Bob Brown's mother, was also born on the same day as Patrice Lumumba, which is July 2nd. Frida Kahlo is the 6th. June Jordan is the 9th. And then, one of my personal favorites, Argelia Laya, Afro-Venezuelan communist activist, feminist, was born on July 10th. And so I was just thinking, so we were initially thinking about reading quotes from all of these folks, but we wanted to make more space for this to actually be an engaging live. But I did want to read a brief quote from her, which for me is kind of making me think about the Supreme Court decisions and things, right? So in an interview, she was asked, do you think Venezuelan women enjoy the same privileges as men? And her response was, it's not about privileges, but about equal rights. It's been demonstrated that in our country, women have fewer rights than men. And among the poor, not only are they at a disadvantage before the laws, but in practice, they have more responsibilities and more duties. The real women's liberation is not in words, it is not on paper, but it is in deeds that demand a deep, profound transformation of society. The creation of a new society without privileges, with equal rights and duties, so that there is well-being and happiness for all in the function of free development of the personality of each person, men and women, and the progress of the country. And that quote, I was just sort of thinking about all of the sort of debates that are happening around the Supreme Court's decision to remove race-based race-based practices in admissions, race-based, considerations in admissions practices. And then the kind of response to that being about getting rid of legacy admissions, right? And the thing is, while I agree that we should get rid of legacy admissions, the thing about getting rid of legacy admissions is that it still doesn't actually address the structural issues that then create our inability to access these places. But then I also think that it's not just about us being able to access these kind of, it's not just about us being able to access these top tiers colleges or whatever, but then it's also in sort of in concert with this SCOTUS decision to not uphold whatever Biden was trying to do with relieving student loan debt, right? And so there are all these ways that I think there has been rhetoric, there has been sort of attempt to create these things on paper that we have not seen real material kind of changes. And so that's just something that made me think about what it is that we're really fighting for, right? And I think that while each of those court decisions independently do matter and they have real sort of impacts on our lives, I think like I'm also trying to think about what are the things that we're actually fighting for in the sort of bigger picture and not these kind of incremental kind of gains that we're looking for.
Well, as we know, right, one of the conditions of Black folks in the United States is reversibility. So anything that is handed out through law or jurisprudence is like wholly reversible. And I think that that's the point. It's meant to, I think I tweeted about this, it's meant to like mollify for a particular time. It's not meant to actually eradicate racial and class hierarchy. And the other thing too is affirmative action is primarily a tool of class formation, of Black class formation, to the extent that it was meant to be anything, right? Because affirmative action expands many. It's like getting a certain amount of set asides of government contracts. It's about getting, you know, a certain amount. It's never everybody. It's getting a certain amount of people, generally meant to match the demographic. So, like, if Blacks are 14% of the country, then have 14% of any institution to match that, right? And so we really have to, you know, we have to really think like, what does this mean in material terms for Black working class and poor people? Like, what is the actual effect? It seems like so much of the lamenting that gets done in these public spaces is for the Black middle class, right? Mm-hmm. And then somebody even tweeted, and I know who it was, I'm just not going to say, like, you know, we need to, it's important that the Black middle class is, you know, that this is an attack on the Black middle class or whatever, I guess. But, and then funny, and that reminds me of this.
I knew you.
This post that I saw on Instagram from another Black bourgeois Negro. What did it? Let me see. What did he? Where can I find this? Because
you sent it to me.
Okay, it said, and this is fun. It's interesting to see how the Black middle class, the Black buffer class, the Black petty bourgeois narrates itself, because it says conservatives are mad that wealthy Michelle Obama identified with everyday Black folk to defend affirmative action. Some whites ignore how the Black blessed speak up for the Black burdened, because our privilege didn't stop slavery, Jim Crow, or voter suppression. Our common struggle did. Now, I don't know that speaking up for affirmative action is about speaking up for working class, poor, Black proletarians, right? Nor do I think that the middle class, the buffer class, the petty bourgeois speaks up for their, you know, people, their subordinates. That is the primary class that's advocating for more police. When we look at like Black elected officials, those are the people who are implementing funding for more police. These are the people who think that, you know, prisons are an objective good. We just need to get rid of the excesses, whatever that means. These are the people who are moving out and therefore eroding the tax base of Black communities. These are not, and this is not across the board, right? And then this idea of even Black blessed, right? It's like, you're not, your wealth is not a blessing. It's exploitation, right? And it's rooted in, you know, in intra-racial oppression. Anyway, so it's just all of that to say, right? We are supposed to be up in arms for these things that affect rich people, famous people, even you know, so-called middle class people, even if the majority of us don't benefit from that shit, right? Because Black businesses don't employ the majority of Black people, right? These Black educated folks don't always or often do scholarship that benefits the Black masses, like, so I don't know that, you know, I don't know, other than, you know, the fact that this attack on not affirmative action, but the race-based considerations is an overall attack on just the progress of Black people in general. I don't know that there's a very real impact on just ordinary Black people writ large. So let's see. I'm just trying to see what Ricky talked about about intersectionality. I'm gonna let that go. I wonder if the attacks on CRT across all school levels were a lead up to the decision in the higher courts. I mean, I think it's multi-pronged. I think the attacks on CRT are are part of a broader strategy. You see, the right is organized. The conservatives, they have been putting together the attack on Roe, the attack on affirmative action, the attack on those two in particular since the 70s. They have been putting together think tanks, political action groups, getting their money up, putting people in local and state government in different positions of power for a long time. They have been, getting positions on school boards. So I think it's part of a broad-based attack, a broad-based both strategy and objective that is bearing fruit now. So, I do think that again, all of these, what these court cases show, what the what this the more the erosion of public education, it just shows like, or it gives us an opportunity to really show on the one hand that like liberalism is never gonna really work for Black people, number one, and number two, what are we gonna do? It gives us the opportunity to like bring back our we, what is it in the book, We Are an African People by Russell Rickford, like bring back our alternative school movement, like.
So that's something that I was
yeah.
That's something that I was kind of thinking about, because when we think about what these affirmative action cases have done, is that they've like you said, they've contributed to the proliferation of a Black middle class. But a part of what that is like people becoming particular kinds of citizens, right? And so if it is that we can kind of divest from some of the ways that we have been sort of attached to what public education in this country means, then is there something, what is our, like you said, what is our response to that? Where are the places where we can actually create educational structures or institutions where we are creating a group of people who are thinking about the problems that we need to solve as people, not just how to get their little slice of the American pie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's happening on all those levels, right? Like I think of like the attack on critical race theory, Afghan studies, whatever it is, but just in general, right? Like what it means, just basic stuff like being forced to say the Pledge of Allegiance in school as a kid, right? And all of these ways that we are indoctrinated into what it means and like what we should want as American people. And I think that this is an opportunity to think differently about the fact that while we value education, we had the type of education we have been getting in a sort of general sense across the board has not benefited us as in general in terms of our collective movement as a people.
Mm-hmm. And the thing about the right wing, or the other aspect of the success of the right wing, is that it makes us fight for things that were not good in the first place. These public schools have not been good, at least since the testing, since the No Child Left Behind, like that whole wave of testing. But we're fighting for public schools, right? Yeah. There was that whole scuffle about the AP African American Studies shit, which okay, but how many of our students are actually in AP classes anyway? Yeah. It's gonna be majority white folks in them AP African American Studies classes, just like it's a lot of white people majoring in African American Studies now. Listen, I'm an African American Studies professor. I think the field is important, but of course, it's just like the attack on Black studies means that we have to fight for Black studies that, in many ways, as I wrote in my dissertation, has been overdetermined by a whole bunch of shit that has moved away from the gown in town community activist Pan-Africanist foundation that brought it into being in the first place. And so we're fighting for shit to be fighting for shit, right? Like. And that is liberalism. Like, and so I think that it's just another conundrum that like we get moved away from, even those of us on the left, we get moved away from our agenda, from our proactive, progressive, like world making agenda to fight for institutions and even individuals for whatever reason that do not have our fucking interest in mind. Like this always happens. And so I wish, not even I wish, like I implore us, I encourage us to be better, to not get distracted by this stuff that actually doesn't really even matter that much.
Yeah. But I think this comment Ricky made, I do think it's interesting that expanding the courts is a conversation now, though, since that's what they attacked Chavez over. I think is it's important to think about the fact that the right, like the shit that they say that they care about is shit only that they care about as so long as it can be used as a tool to their advantage, right? So it was never about should we or should we not expand the courts, right? It's about who the courts get expanded for and for what reasons and what is being done there, right? Because their whole part of their attack with Chavez was that it was allowing him to extend his terms, but extending his presidential terms were about his ability to continue to enact certain social programs, right? And so that's what they wanted to prevent. That's what they wanted to block. They don't actually care about how much control they have of it. It's just a matter of what is being done with it, right?
Yeah, and so to me, I don't think the court should be expanded because the Democrats get their ass whooped and everything. So if they expand the courts, it's not going to have any impact under any Democratic.
Yeah.
So and I'm setting aside for a second that the Democrats are not better than the Republicans, but what ultimately we'll do is that we'll have what 12 conservatives and 4 liberals instead of however many, whatever, what is it, 6-3 right now? Like the Democrats get outmaneuvered all of the time because they always kowtow to this vaunted mythical bipartisanship that the Republicans don't give a fuck about. They're not doing that. They're not doing that unless the bipartisanship is for some right-wing agenda.
Yeah.
Like it's like the Democrats are an anomaly. They're a structural anomaly, right? They have protruding noses but no backbone. And yet, for some reason, we're supposed to cha-cha slide for them every 4 years. And so I think it's whatever again, these legalistic, these sort of law strategies, all of these are to the end of trying to redeem post-slave settler colonial society, and I think that that's not something that we necessarily need to be invested in. Again, I think that we can use all of these moments for political education and for organizing, and to get our people to understand the Supreme Court, like all 3 branches of government. But in terms of that being something that we put our revolutionary energy into, absolutely fucking not.
Well, we are kind of at the end of the hour that we kind of projected for our shows, for the lives. I don't know if there's anything else that's like really burning on folks that they want to put out there as we get ready to wrap things up. But so there was a question earlier on about whether or not we had a Patreon, and we do not have one yet. And again, like I think we said it in the first one, like it's something that we only used the Patreon last time to pay to Black, right? We are not, this is a passion project for us. This is not something that we're attempting to make money off of.
Look, I would like a bottom grill. I'm not gonna lie. I would like to use a bottom grill. Somebody wants it, I'm gonna put it on my registry. So,
but we are thinking about starting just because we may we may get back to trying to get somebody to help edit and produce some things. But part of that is, our decision to do half pre-recorded, half live is to kind of cut down on some of that work. So hopefully you all are enjoying the format so far. We will make an announcement really soon about when the official start of the season will be and when y'all can rely on regular weekly content.
Did we say August 9th? Was it like Friday? I thought we decided that.
Oh, well, it wasn't the 9th though. It would have been the 19th.
No, it was the 11th or the 18th. But since you're not going to Ghana, probably August 11th.
That's fine.
I think it was the 11th. So I think that the first official episode will be Friday, August 11th. And that will be a pre-recorded. And then the 18th will be a live like this and so on and so forth. So, but the other thing about a Patreon too is that generally speaking, when you have a Patreon, you have to have extra content. We ain't got, I don't know what extra content. We don't have any extra content to give. So it's like, you know what I mean? If, you want to, so I don't know what y'all's thoughts are on that, right? Like in terms of, just giving just out of the kindness of your heart without, and maybe some type of extra thing here and there, but knit for us. I wish.
But to be fair though, like because we are like thinking about some of the subscriptions to things that make doing this easier. The Patreon might be worth it just to at least pay for some of those subscriptions and things that so that we don't have to pay out of our pocket if we need to upgrade. Like right now we're using StreamYard for free, but if we need to upgrade for whatever reason, there was something else I was gonna say, but I lost my train of thought. So.
Yeah. So I mean, and I guess we're open to suggestions about what you all think about like extra content.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. Please do use the Gmail, the Life Study Revolution Gmail, to like let us know, like if there are particular topics that you really want us to weigh in on, whether it be on the pre-recorded episodes or the lives. Like, just let us know ahead of time so we can work towards that.
Recipes, it's no burden to cook. Yeah, it's no burden Stelly either because I can't cook, but Layla can. I mean, listen, I could put together. I made chicken noodle soup today, actually.
Oh Lord,
scratch, but I did. I put some vegetables in there. But anyways, we could think of something or whatever. But again, like part of like what allows us to come back for LSR is for it to not be so time intensive. So
yeah.
But if you have suggestions, let us know. We could do maybe like work sessions or something via Zoom.
Yeah.
Some reading lists or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for tapping into our first live. I think it was cool. And y'all are popping as always. Wait, and Danny Highfong has a Patreon without a paywall. What do y'all mean by with a paywall or no paywall? What do you mean by this?
Is that there's nothing that you are necessarily you're not paying for a service, you're just paying to support in general? Is that what that means? Francis, I think, said that.
Yeah, France. Somebody else says something without somebody else has something without a paywall. That Richard Medhurst, T Brown. Richard Medhurst has a Patreon.
Ricky said she's sending a DoorDash talking about noodles for the baby because you talking about noodles.
No, you guys, I have particular cravings, and like chicken noodle soup is one of my like spicy food, McDonald's chicken nuggets, and like chicken noodle soup is one of my cravings. I mean, listen, send the DoorDash, Ricky. You feel me? But send me some pho.
No, the way that she has craved McDonald's chicken nuggets is very interesting.
It's great. I had some in my backpack the other day because I got them at the airport. Listen, I'm eating vegetables too, y'all. The baby is fine, but it's cravings are very interesting. But spicy food is exactly. What's wrong with
Nothing's
chicken?
wrong with it if you actually make
it soda on the side.
But them sodium bombs in the can are not great. But if you make it yourself, it's great.
Listen, as long as my blood pressure is under control, let me be myself. Sharice, no. Wait, is this in the Nuggies?
Probably.
Nuggies? Okay, well, listen.
Oh, this is one thing I want to say. So, I am doing just a personal 30-day wellness challenge. And the challenge is, it's not like a workout every day. It's that you commit to doing something for your well-being, whether that be your physical, mental, or whatever well-being, at least once a day, right? And to actually journal about it, right? And so it might be a workout, it might be, meditation, it might be journaling, but it also might be, I chose not to drink today, or I chose not to eat this particular thing, or I chose to eat this other thing, or I chose to, so like my other friend recently had a baby, and I spent this weekend, I got to go meet the new baby, and I spent like 3 hours just holding a newborn baby. And newborn babies for me are just, I love them. I like them when they're in their very structurally unsound stage, and I like to hold them. And that was just like, that was my thing for that day, right? So I invite you all to join me on this 30-day challenge, and report back, reflect on what those things are for yourself as we continue moving forward.
Wait, so you're doing it this month or next month? Because there's Black August too. So we got the whole Black August.
Yeah, so I'm doing that this month because Black August will be a different. Because usually with Black August, because of the history of the fasting inside the prisons, usually fasting is some component of it. I'm not fasting from anything at this particular moment, so I probably will fast from something for Black August, but that'll be separate.
I can't do like a food fast because I'm preggo, but I could fast from. I mean, I already gave up everything I like because I'm pregnant. I gave up alcohol. Like, I don't know. I'm living an austere life, but
Lord.
anywho,
It's a temporary condition.
it's a temporary condition. Although, who knows?
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, y'all have my 20-week appointment coming up in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. What is it? On the 24th, we'll have our 20-week ultrasound. That's when they do like the internal, check the baby's internals. That's when we'll have more pictures, up-to-date pictures that we could share. So, and yeah, and so right now we have one name on the list, Naima. Naima. So but I got some books. So I got some African name books from one of my girls. Shout out to Catherine Benjamin Golden, my beloved. So we're thinking about stuff, but send good name. We want like African names that are meaningful. So send
Really
if you guys have suggestions. Shout out code. Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Mark Dub. It is culture. I guess it's not only the name of a song, but it's the name of his first wife, Naima. But it also means it's Arabic, I think, or it's either Arabic or Swahili, and it means like grace, pleasantness, and peaceful. I wanted to name the baby Peace. My partner was like, "Fuck no." Which I think Peace is a great name for a baby. So, anyway.
Okay.
All right, y'all. So we'll see you next time. August 11th is when the next episode will drop. But be in contact in the meantime. Follow us on Instagram. What is it? LSR _ podcast on Instagram. On Twitter, it's LSR _ podcast _ and hit us up on our email, life study revolution. My life is a struggle. Life study revolution at gmail.com. So
and thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in. Peace out, y'all.
See y'all next time. Bye.
Bye.